Roland Mumford with Mumford.law. We litigate civil rights cases in Arkansas, Tennessee, and Georgia. If you are watching this as a YouTube short, then please click over to the videos tab and watch this as a long form video. What happens when a police officer entrusted with enforcing the law is accused of crossing the line himself? Today, we're breaking down a series of incidents involving a Brooklyn police sergeant, allegations of excessive force, and what the law actually says about officer conduct. The officer at the center of this case is Sergeant Paul Stein of the Brooklyn Police Department. Over the course of several months, Stein was involved in multiple confrontations that raised serious questions about use of force, both while off duty and during an in-custody arrest. According to local reporting, one incident occurred while Stein was off duty. A civilian alleged that Stein sideswiped his vehicle and left the scene. The civilian followed Stein to the police department, employee entrance to confront him, and attempt to file a report. Surveillance video reportedly shows Stein pushing the man and repeatedly kicking his leg during the confrontation. The civilian later filed an assault complaint and a crash report with another police department. At the time of reporting, no criminal charges had been filed related to that incident, but it added to growing concerns about Stein's conduct. The more serious allegation stems from a separate incident that ultimately led to Stein's termination from the department. On September 4th, officers arrested a woman on an outstanding warrant for aggravated menacing. Police reports described her as intoxicated and uncooperative. She was handcuffed with her hands behind her back and transported to the police station. Due to her behavior, officers decided to place her in a restraint chair. During the process, Stein stepped on the woman's stocking red feet to prevent her from kicking. The woman yelled at him to get off her feet. When he did not, she spat directly into his face. According to internal police reports, Stein responded by slapping the woman across the left cheek with an open hand, then punching her in the jaw multiple times with a closed fist. When another officer attempted to intervene by grabbing Stein's arm, Stein switched hands and struck her again. Photographs taken afterwards showed the woman suffered a cut lip and visible bruising to her jaw. Stein later told investigators that his intent was not to injure the woman, but to stop her from spitting at him. Department leadership disagreed. The police chief described the conduct as excessive and egregious and characterized it as malfeasance, meaning intentional conduct that is wrongful or unlawful. Stein was terminated from the department less than 2 weeks later. Here is a news story on the matter, and take a look at this. On the other side, we will discuss the legal issues and claims for excessive force these two individuals may have.
A Brooklyn officer who was in charge of reviewing use of force cases is fired for using excessive force. And this is not the first time the officer has been in the news. Last year, he was accused of hitting a man with his truck and later assaulting that driver. Now he's been fired for allegedly punching a woman multiple times in the face while her hands were cuffed behind her back. 19 investigator Mike Mason has a story you will see only on 19 News.
After 18 years with the Brooklyn Police Department, a sergeant with a six-figure salary has now been terminated. Last fall, Brooklyn's mayor fired Sergeant Paul Stein for an incident that happened on September 4th. An internal investigation found he struck a woman 5 times in the face while her hands were cuffed behind her back. Stein's been in the news before. 19 Investigates broke the story about an incident that occurred on April 30th. Juan Wyckoff was driving an I-90, and he says Stein's truck hit his car, then sped off at more than 100 miles an hour.
He literally just tried to run me off the highway and kept going.
At the time, Wyckoff didn't know Stein was an off-duty cop on his way to work. Wyckoff grabbed his cell phone and he followed the truck and recorded it driving erratically. When the two arrived at the police station, Wyckoff followed Stein to the employee entrance. That's when surveillance video captured the officer aggressively pushing Wyckoff away and kicking his leg.
Or when it's assault on camera, not a crime. It makes no sense, because if I would have defended myself, I wouldn't have been able to talk to nobody.
You think you'd be behind bars?
If not worse.
Wyckoff wanted to press charges, but after police investigated, Stein only received a traffic citation and a written reprimand. That all changed this past September when police arrested a woman on an outstanding warrant for aggravated menacing. The report states she was intoxicated, acting uncooperative and belligerent, so officers cuffed her hands behind her back and decided to place her in a restraint chair. The report says Stein stepped on her feet to stop her from kicking. She said his boots were hurting her, so she told him to get off. When he didn't, the woman spat directly into his face. The report says Stein slapped her left cheek with an open hand, then he punched her left jaw 3 times. When another officer grabbed his right arm, Stein switched hands and struck her with his left fist. The chief wrote, "I believe this incident rises to the level of malfeasance, intentional conduct that is wrong or unlawful." He called the punches excessive and egregious. During Stein's pre-disciplinary hearing, he prepared a statement saying, "My objective was not to harm the subject, but to stop her from spitting at me again." He said, "I believe that the force I used was reasonable." Stein claimed the strikes were not delivered with a high degree of force and the suspect wasn't harmed. But reports show the woman did have lacerations to her lip and bruising to her jawline. Officers took photos to document her injuries, but we can't show you who she is since she's now considered an assault victim. At the end of his statement, Stein jotted down these handwritten notes. They read, "Undergoing counseling, on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and under pressure since the traffic incident." Stein was terminated on September 17th.
Stein was one of 3 officers at the department in charge of reviewing use of force incidents. We reached out to him for his side of the story, but we haven't heard back. The city has turned this over to a special prosecutor to review for possible charges. At this point, he hasn't filed any, but we'll, of course, keep you posted if he does. Mike Mason, 19 News.
You can go deeper into the investigations on our streaming app. Our 19 Investigates show airs every Thursday night at 6:30 on 19 News Plus.
In addition to the internal investigation, an independent legal review was initiated. Because the case involved a police officer accused of using force on a restrained person, a special prosecutor was appointed to review the evidence and determine whether criminal charges are warranted. The role of a special prosecutor is to provide independence and avoid conflicts of interest when a local prosecutor regularly works with the same police department involved in an investigation. The special prosecutor has authority to review body camera footage, surveillance video, medical records, internal reports, and witness statements, and to decide whether the officer's conduct meets the legal standard for criminal charges such as assault. As of the most recent reporting, no criminal charges have been filed, and the review remains ongoing. This is absolutely incredulous and absurd. Beyond criminal exposure, cases like this also raises the possibility of a civil lawsuit for excessive force. Most excessive force lawsuits are filed under federal civil rights law, specifically 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, which is what I litigate as a special practice. To succeed on an excessive force claim, a plaintiff generally must prove 3 core elements. First, that the defendant was acting under color of state law, meaning the officer was exercising official authority. That element is usually straightforward when the officer is on duty or acting in a law enforcement capacity. Second, that the officer used force against the plaintiff. This includes strikes, punches, restraints, or other physical actions used to control a person. Third, and most importantly, that the force used was objectively unreasonable under the circumstances. This is where most excessive force cases are won or lost. Courts evaluate reasonableness under the Supreme Court's decision in Graham versus O'Connor, a case that we have talked about in previous videos. Judges and juries consider factors such as the severity of the alleged crime, whether the individual posed an immediate threat to the safety of officers or others, and whether the individual was actively resisting or attempting to flee. One common question in cases like this is whether probable cause for the underlying arrest matters. The answer is yes, but only to a point. Probable cause for an arrest does not automatically justify the amount of force used. Even if an arrest is lawful, officers can still be held liable if they use excessive force during that arrest or while the person is in custody. Courts have repeatedly held that a lawful arrest can still result in an unconstitutional use of force if the level of force is disproportionate to the threat posed. In other words, the legality of their arrest and the legality of the force are analyzed separately. A person can be lawfully arrested and still have a valid excessive force claim. This distinction becomes especially important when the individual is already handcuffed or otherwise restrained. Once a person is secured and no longer poses an immediate threat, the government's justification for using significant force drops dramatically. Striking a restrained individual, particularly in the head or face, is often viewed by courts as a serious escalation that requires strong justification. Spitting, while offensive and potentially criminal in some jurisdictions, does not automatically permit physical retaliation. Courts typically expect officers to use alternative control measures, protective equipment, or disengagement techniques rather than strikes that risk serious injury. In a civil lawsuit, plaintiffs may seek damages for physical injuries, emotional distress, medical costs, and violations of constitutional rights. In some cases, punitive damages may also be available if the conduct is found to be particularly reckless or malicious. Separately, departments can be held liable in limited circumstances if plaintiffs can show that the unconstitutional force resulted from a failure to train, supervise, or discipline officers, though those claims face a higher legal threshold. This case highlights broader issues in policing, including how departments handle allegations against their own officers, how use of force policies are enforced, and how accountability works when officers are placed in positions of authority and trust. It also underscores a key legal principle. Police officers are granted significant power, but that power comes with limits. When force is used, especially against someone who is restrained, the law demands that it be necessary, proportional, and reasonable. As the investigation continues, the special prosecutor's review remains pending, and potential civil claims remain on the table. This case serves as a reminder that officer conduct is subject to criminal, civil, and administrative scrutiny, and that accountability does not depend on whether a situation was frustrating, insulting, or emotionally charged. If you want more legal breakdowns of police conduct, civil rights cases, and use of force law, subscribe to the channel and let us know what case you want covered next. If you have a specific story with video, such as from a body camera video, that you would like me to do a video about, please go to mumford.law and send me a contact page message, which will be emailed to me. Please click like, share, and subscribe, and have a great day. Thank you for your time.